The dinner rush at Bellini's had finally slowed down, and Amelia Chen's feet were killing her. She'd been running around for nearly 10 hours straight, but she couldn't go home yet. The private party in the back room was just getting started, and these were the kinds of customers who tipped well enough to make the extra hours worthwhile. 2 more hours, she whispered to herself as she adjusted her black bow tie in the staff bathroom mirror. Her dark hair was still neatly pulled back, but exhaustion had dulled her eyes. Amelia splashed cold water on her face and took a deep breath. The money from tonight would help cover next month's rent. And maybe she could finally replace those worn-out textbooks for her graduate music theory class. Back in the kitchen, the head chef was barking orders while line cooks scrambled to plate appetizers for the Kaplan party. Everyone knew Victor Kaplan was a big deal, some tech billionaire who'd made his fortune in artificial intelligence. His parties were legendary, both for their extravagance and for the generous bonuses staff received afterward. Chen, Table 9 needs water refills and Mr. Kaplan asked for another bottle of the Chateau Margaux, her manager called out, not looking up from his clipboard. On it, Amelia replied, loading a silver tray with crystal glasses. She moved through the private dining room with practiced grace, becoming almost invisible as she slipped between conversations about stock options and vacation homes. The room buzzed with the confident voices of people who never worried about bills or student loans. Victor Kaplan sat at the head of the table, commanding attention without even trying. Unlike his flashier guests, he wore a simple black sweater that probably cost more than Amelia's monthly rent. His salt and pepper hair was casually styled, and fine lines around his eyes hinted at his 40-something years. But it was his intense focus that really stood out. When someone spoke to him, he listened like they were the only person in the room. Amelia carefully poured wine into his glass, keeping her movements smooth and silent. "Thank you," he said, surprising her with direct eye contact and a genuine smile. She nodded politely and continued around the table. Most guests barely acknowledged her existence, too wrapped up in their own importance. One man with slicked back hair and a too loud laugh was particularly obnoxious, gesturing wildly as he talked about his latest yacht purchase. And then I told them, "I don't care if it takes another month, I want the gold fixtures. Not this stainless steel garbage," he boasted, accidentally bumping Amelia's arm as she poured wine for the woman beside him. A few drops splashed onto the white tablecloth, and the man turned to her with an annoyed expression. "Watch it, sweetheart. This suit costs more than you make in a year." The woman next to him tittered nervously. Amelia felt her cheeks burn, but she kept her composure. "I apologize, sir. Let me take care of that for you," she said quietly, already reaching for a clean napkin to blot the spill. "Maybe they should hire waitstaff who can actually do their jobs," the man continued, clearly enjoying the attention his rudeness had attracted. Amelia kept her eyes down, focusing on the small stain. She'd learned long ago that defending herself only made things worse. "Just clean up and move on." "Actually, Richard," Victor's voice cut through the awkward moment, "I think you'll find it was your enthusiastic storytelling that caused the spill." His tone was light but carried an unmistakable edge. "Besides, a truly expensive suit can handle a few drops of wine, can it?" The table fell silent. Richard's face reddened as he forced a laugh. "Of course, Victor. Just having a bit of fun." Victor nodded at Amelia. "The service has been impeccable all evening. Please continue." She gave him a grateful glance and moved on to the next guest, but she could feel Victor's eyes following her around the room, not in the creepy way some wealthy men watched the female staff, but with curiosity, like he was trying to solve a puzzle. As the main course was served, Amelia overheard snippets of Victor's conversation with the woman to his right, a fashion designer with striking silver hair. "People are so rarely what they seem at first glance," Victor was saying. "I've made my fortune seeing patterns others miss. Is that why you keep watching that waitress?" The woman asked with a knowing smile. "Seeing patterns?" Victor chuckled. "Maybe. There's something about her. She doesn't belong here." "Victor, are you suggesting Bellini's hired unqualified staff?" the woman teased. "Quite the opposite. I think she's overqualified. Notice how she moves? Classical dancer's posture. And earlier, when someone's phone rang with Chopin's Nocturne, her fingers twitched in perfect rhythm with the notes. Muscle memory. Interesting, don't you think?" Amelia nearly dropped the plate she was serving. She hadn't realized her old habits were so visible. Years of piano training had left permanent marks on her, apparently, ones she couldn't simply wipe away by changing careers. For the next hour, She made a conscious effort to avoid Victor's table when possible, unnerved by his observations. The last thing she needed was attention from someone like him. People with power often created complications, and her life was complicated enough already. As dinner wound down and dessert plates were cleared, Amelia's manager pulled her aside near the kitchen door. "Chen, Mr. Kaplan specifically requested you serve the cognac in the lounge area. Don't screw this up. He's a big tipper and an even bigger influence in this city." Amelia nodded reluctantly. "Yes, sir." The restaurant's lounge was even more opulent than the dining room, with velvet couches and a stunning view of the city lights. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a blanket of twinkling skyscrapers against the night sky. In the corner stood a magnificent grand piano, a Steinway that the restaurant owner kept perfectly tuned but rarely allowed anyone to play. Amelia's heart ached at the sight of it. How long had it been since she'd touched a piano like that? 3 years? 4? Before her father's illness, before the money ran out, before everything changed. She arranged crystal snifters on a silver tray and carefully poured measures of amber liquid into each one. The rich aroma of expensive cognac filled her nostrils as she carried the tray toward the lounge, where Victor's party had reassembled. They were louder now, alcohol having loosened inhibitions. Richard, the rude man from dinner, was telling another exaggerated story while sprawled across one of the couches. Victor stood slightly apart, gazing out at the city view with a thoughtful expression. As Amelia entered with the cognac, he turned and their eyes met. For a moment she felt strangely exposed, as if he could somehow see through the carefully constructed facade she'd built. Waitress, student, ordinary person to the person she used to be, the one who'd once played on stages across China as a child prodigy, before real life intervened. "Ah, perfect timing," Victor said, gesturing for her to approach. She offered the tray, and as he took a glass, he leaned slightly closer and spoke just above a whisper. "You know, there's more to life than serving drinks to people who don't see you." Amelia's hand trembled slightly. "I'm just doing my job, sir, and doing it well. But it's not your only talent, is it?" Before she could respond, Richard's booming voice interrupted them. "Hey, Victor, remember that party in Monaco where you challenged that hedge fund guy to a yacht race? What was the bet again, $1 million? Victor smiled politely but didn't answer. Instead, his gaze drifted to the grand piano in the corner, and a curious expression crossed his face, part mischief, part genuine interest. He took a sip of his cognac, eyes never leaving the gleaming instrument. Amelia felt a sudden chill. Something was about to happen, and somehow she knew it involved her. She tried to slip away, but Victor's voice stopped her. "Tell me," he said, just loud enough for her to hear. "Do you play?" The question hung in the air between them, weighted with possibility and danger. Amelia looked at the piano, then back at Victor's intrigued expression. She hadn't touched a keyboard in years, had locked away that part of herself along with her broken dreams. "No," she lied, her voice steady despite the painful thudding of her heart. "I don't play at all." Victor raised an eyebrow at Amelia's denial. His eyes held a glint that made her stomach tighten. He didn't believe her? "Interesting," he said, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "Because when Chopin was playing earlier, your fingers were conducting a perfect performance." Heat rushed to Amelia's face. She clutched her serving tray tighter, searching for an exit from this conversation. "If there's nothing else you need, sir, I should check on the other guests." But Victor wasn't finished. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I recognize talent when I see it. It's how I've built my fortune, finding hidden potential where others see nothing special." "You're mistaken," Amelia insisted, her pulse quickening. Years of protecting herself from disappointment had built walls she wasn't ready to tear down for some rich man's curiosity. Victor smiled, not unkindly. "Perhaps." He turned away, rejoining his guests, but Amelia didn't trust the ease with which he'd let her go. She hurried back to the kitchen, hoping to hide among the bustling staff. Her manager intercepted her at the door. "Everything okay out there? Kaplan's not unhappy, is he?" Worry lines creased his forehead. "Everything's fine," she assured him, though her hands trembled slightly as she set down the tray, just bringing back some empty glasses. For the next half hour, Amelia managed to avoid the lounge area, focusing on helping the kitchen staff clean up after the dinner. The familiar routine of stacking plates and organizing silverware calmed her nerves. She almost convinced herself that Victor had forgotten their strange interaction. Then her manager appeared again, his face tight with stress. "Chen, they're asking for you in the lounge. Specifically you," her heart sank. "Me, why?" "I don't know, but Mr. Kaplan insisted. Just go, please. Whatever he wants, just smile and be accommodating." With reluctant steps, Amelia made her way back to the lounge. The party had grown livelier, with more drinks flowing and laughter echoing off the high ceilings. As she entered, she immediately sensed a shift in the atmosphere. Conversations quieted, and several guests glanced her way with curious expressions. Victor stood by the piano, one hand resting casually on its polished surface. The sight of his fingers so close to those keys made her anxious in a way she couldn't explain. "Ah, there she is," he announced, loud enough for everyone to hear. The room fell quiet, all eyes turning to Amelia. She froze in the doorway, instinct telling her to run, but there was nowhere to go. Victor gestured for her to approach. With the entire room watching, she had no choice but to comply, each step feeling heavier than the last. "I was just telling my friends about an interesting theory I have," Victor said when she reached him, "about hidden talents in unexpected places." Richard, the rude guest from dinner, snorted from his spot on the couch. "Oh, this should be good." Victor ignored him, focusing entirely on Amelia. "You know, I've always believed that true ability finds a way to express itself, regardless of circumstances." Amelia said nothing, her mouth dry with apprehension. "We were just discussing what skills might be hiding in plain sight," Victor continued, "which led me to a somewhat unorthodox proposal." He turned to address the whole room. "I'm willing to bet that there's more extraordinary talent in this room than we realize. In fact," he paused, his eyes gleaming with mischief, "I'll make it interesting. $10,000 to any staff member who can sit at this piano and play something truly impressive." A murmur ran through the crowd. Amelia's manager, who had followed her into the lounge, looked horrified. "Mr. Kaplan, I don't think—" he began, but Victor waved him off. "It's just a bit of fun," Victor insisted. "No pressure. If no one plays, no harm done." But as his gaze returned to Amelia, she understood this was no casual offer. This was a direct challenge meant specifically for her. "What do you say?" he asked, his voice softening so only she could hear. "Are you really going to let this opportunity pass?" For a moment, Amelia was transported back to her childhood in Beijing, to her father's small apartment where an old upright piano took up most of the living room. She remembered his weathered hands guiding hers over the keys, his voice gentle but firm. "Music is not just what you play, Amelia. It's what you allow yourself to feel when you play it." She hadn't allowed herself to feel anything at a piano for years. "I told you," she said quietly to Victor. "I don't play." His expression revealed disappointment but not surprise. "That's a shame. I thought you might be different." Something in his tone sparked an unexpected flare of defiance in Amelia's chest. Different. The word echoed in her mind. She'd spent years trying to blend in, to be invisible, to bury the part of herself that had once shone so brightly. Richard's loud voice cut through her thoughts.
"Well, that was anticlimactic."
"Did you really expect the help to suddenly reveal hidden talents?" He laughed, raising his glass. "Next you'll tell us the busboy is secretly a chess grandmaster." Several guests joined in his laughter. Amelia felt their amusement like a physical blow, not just at her, but at everyone like her, people they saw as nothing more than background fixtures in their privileged lives. She glanced at her manager, who looked deeply uncomfortable but remained silent. No rescue would come from that quarter. Victor moved away from the piano, signaling that the entertainment was over. "Well, it was just a thought," he said, reaching for another drink. The party began to resume its normal rhythm, attention shifting away from Amelia. She should have felt relieved. Instead, she felt something cracking inside her, a wall that had protected her from hope and disappointment for so long. Before she could stop herself, she spoke. "Wait." Her voice was barely audible, but Victor heard it. He turned back, one eyebrow raised in question. Amelia took a deep breath. "I'll play." The conversation in the room died again. Her manager stared at her in disbelief. "You'll play?" Victor repeated, his expression unreadable. "Yes." Her voice was stronger now. Richard scoffed from his seat. "This ought to be good. Probably learned chopsticks at a mall piano." Victor silenced him with a look, then gestured toward the piano with an elegant sweep of his hand. "It's all yours." The walk to the piano was the longest of Amelia's life. Each step felt like moving through deep water, resistance pushing against her from all sides. The polished bench gleamed under the soft lighting as she carefully sat down, adjusting her position from muscle memory. The keys before her seemed both foreign and achingly familiar. She rested her fingers lightly upon them without pressing down, feeling the cool ivory beneath her fingertips. How long had it been? 4 years? 2 months and 17 days since she'd last performed. Since she'd last allowed herself this one pure joy. A hush fell over the room. Amelia closed her eyes, shutting out the watching eyes, the judgment, the expectations. In that moment of darkness, she found herself back in the concert hall in Beijing, 12 years old, her father watching proudly from the front row. When her fingers finally pressed down, the first notes of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 3 filled the room. The piece was notoriously difficult, demanding both technical precision and emotional depth. She had played it the last time she performed publicly, before her father's illness, before everything changed. For the first few measures, her playing was hesitant, her fingers remembering the pathways but rusty from disuse. Then something shifted. The music took over, flowing through her like a current. Her hands remembered what her mind had tried to forget. The patterns, the rhythms, the subtle dynamics that breathed life into the notes. The room around her disappeared. There was only the music building and receding like ocean waves, carrying her away from the restaurant, away from her struggle, away from the years of silence. She didn't see the astonished expressions on the faces of Victor's guests. She didn't see Richard's jaw drop open in shock or the tears that sprang to her manager's eyes. She didn't see Victor himself standing absolutely still, his drink forgotten in his hand as he watched her transformation. The piece grew more complex, her fingers flying across the keys with increasing confidence and speed. Emotion poured through her playing, all the grief, longing, and buried dreams she'd carried for years finding voice in Rachmaninoff's powerful composition. When she reached the thunderous climax of the first movement, she felt something break free inside her chest, a dam crumbling, releasing years of pent-up passion and pain. Her body swayed with the music, no longer rigid with the formality of classical training, but alive with genuine feeling. As the final notes resonated through the lounge, Amelia slowly opened her eyes, returning to herself, to the room, to reality. For several heartbeats there was absolute silence. She kept her gaze fixed on the keys, afraid to look up and see judgment or worse, indifference on the faces of Victor's wealthy friends. Then, from somewhere behind her, a single person began to applaud. Others joined in, the applause swelling until it filled the room entirely. Only then did Amelia dare to turn around. The expressions she saw weren't what she expected. These weren't the polite, detached reactions of the wealthy to an evening's entertainment. These were faces transformed by genuine awe, and standing nearest to her, hands frozen mid-clap, was Victor. His eyes held not triumph at winning his bet, not the smug satisfaction she'd feared, but something far more surprising. Wonder, and what looked remarkably like respect. Amelia's hands trembled as she rose from the piano bench. The room still echoed with applause, but she felt oddly disconnected from it all, as if watching herself from a distance. After years of silence, she had finally played again, and her body hummed with the lingering energy of the music. Victor approached first, his expression one of genuine amazement. That was... He paused, seemingly at a loss for words, perhaps for the first time in his life. Extraordinary doesn't begin to cover it. Before Amelia could respond, she was surrounded by the party guests, their earlier indifference replaced by eager curiosity. "Where did you study?" asked a woman in a midnight blue dress. "Have you performed professionally?" Another inquired. "Why on earth are you working as a waitress?" This from Richard, his former condescension now tinged with confusion. Amelia struggled to find her voice. The walls she had carefully built around her past were crumbling, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for what might rush in. Her manager pushed through the crowd, his face a mixture of astonishment and concern. "Chen, I had no idea." "I think," Victor interrupted smoothly, "our pianist deserves a moment to breathe." He gently created space around her, shielding her from the barrage of questions. "And perhaps a drink?" Amelia nodded gratefully, suddenly aware of how dry her throat felt. Victor guided her to a quiet corner of the lounge while signaling a bartender. "Water, please," she requested when the bartender arrived. Her hand still trembled slightly as she accepted the glass. "So," Victor said once they were relatively alone, "you don't play at all, huh?" There was no accusation in his tone, only gentle amusement. Amelia took a long sip of water before answering. "I didn't lie. I haven't played in over 4 years. And yet you just performed one of the most technically challenging piano concertos ever written as if you'd never stopped." He studied her with genuine curiosity. That kind of talent doesn't just disappear. She looked down at her hands, server's hands now, slightly rough from work, nails cut practically short. Once they had been protected, moisturized daily, nails perfectly maintained for performances. "It didn't disappear," she said quietly. "I buried it." Victor waited, giving her space to continue or not. The party continued around them, but it felt distant, as if they existed in their own private bubble. "I was a child prodigy in China," Amelia finally said, the words feeling strange on her tongue after so long. "I started playing at 4, was performing with orchestras by 8, touring by 12. "I knew it," Victor said. "The discipline in your movements, the way you carry yourself, it all suggested classical training." Amelia nodded. "My father was a music professor. Not famous, but respected. He recognized something in me before I could even reach the pedals without a booster seat." "And then?" Victor prompted gently when she fell silent. Amelia took another sip of water. "My father got sick during my 2nd year at the Central Conservatory of Music in Beijing. Cancer, very aggressive. The treatments were expensive, and China's healthcare system..." She trailed off. "We sold everything, his instruments, our small apartment. Eventually, even my performance piano." She could still remember the day they'd watched the movers take away the baby grand, a gift from a sponsor after her first international competition win. It had felt like losing a limb. I dropped out of school to care for him, took whatever jobs I could find, but it wasn't enough. Her voice remained steady, though the pain was still fresh. He died anyway, leaving me with crushing debt and a half-finished education. Victor listened intently, his usual confidence subdued by her story. "I came to America after that. Student visa. Started over. Got into graduate studies for music theory, but performance," she gestured vaguely. "That dream died with my father. Until tonight," Victor said softly. Amelia finally looked up, meeting his gaze. "Until tonight," she agreed. Across the room, someone was taking a video with their phone. Probably had been since she started playing. In the age of social media, Amelia knew her moment of vulnerability would likely be online before the night was over. "About that bet," Victor said, reaching into his jacket. "I believe I owe you $10,000. He pulled out a checkbook, and Amelia felt a flash of shame. She hadn't played for his money. "No," she said firmly. "I don't want it." Victor paused, pen in hand. "You earned it fair and square." "I didn't play for a bet," Amelia insisted. "I played because..." She struggled to articulate the complex emotions that had driven her to the piano. "Because I needed to remember who I used to be." Understanding dawned in Victor's eyes. "Then consider it an advance," he said, still writing the check. "An advance for what?" "Your first professional performance in America." He tore the check from the book and offered it to her. "My charitable foundation is hosting a gala next month. We showcase extraordinary talents from around the world. I'd like you to be our featured pianist." Amelia stared at the check, not reaching for it. "I haven't practiced in years. One emotional performance doesn't mean I'm ready for a stage again." "So practice," Victor said simply. "Quit this job, which we both know is just paying the bills, and focus on your music for the next month. This check should cover your expenses." The offer was tempting, almost painfully so. To play again, to reclaim that part of herself that had brought her such joy. But Amelia had learned the hard way that dreams were fragile things, easily crushed by reality. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Is it just because you won your bet? Proving your theory about hidden talent?" Victor considered her question thoughtfully. "Partly," he admitted with surprising honesty. "I do enjoy being right, but mostly because what you just did at that piano..." He glanced back at the instrument almost reverently. "It would be a crime to let that talent remain hidden." Before Amelia could respond, a commotion near the entrance to the lounge caught their attention. A young woman with a press badge was trying to enter, only to be blocked by the restaurant manager. I heard Victor Kaplan discovered the next Lang Lang, the reporter was saying. Just need a quick interview. Amelia felt the blood drain from her face. This was happening too fast. One moment she was serving drinks, the next she was the center of attention, her carefully constructed new life threatening to unravel. Victor noticed her panic. You're not ready for that yet, he observed, rising from his seat. Let me handle this. He crossed to the entrance and spoke quietly to both the manager and the reporter. Money changed hands. Amelia couldn't tell if it was a bribe to make the reporter leave or payment for an exclusive later. Either way, the woman retreated, though she cast one curious glance at Amelia before departing. When Victor returned, Amelia had composed herself somewhat. This is why I stopped, she said. The attention, the pressure, the expectations, it consumed everything. I couldn't just play for the joy of it anymore. Victor nodded, understanding in his eyes. Fame is a double-edged sword. Believe me, I know, he sat beside her again. But you don't have to decide everything tonight. Take the check. Take some time. Think about what you really want. He placed the check on the table between them. And if you decide to play at the gala, it will be on your terms. No press unless you want it. No expectations except the ones you set for yourself. Amelia looked at the check, her mind racing with possibilities she hadn't allowed herself to consider in years. Could she really return to music? Did she even want to? But she already knew the answer. The moment her fingers had touched those keys, something essential had reawakened inside her. Playing tonight hadn't just been revisiting an old skill. It had been like finding a missing piece of herself. With slightly shaking fingers, she picked up the check. I can't promise anything, she warned. Victor smiled, genuine warmth replacing his usual calculated charm. I'm not asking for promises. Just be open to possibilities. A subtle chime sounded from his phone. He checked it briefly, then looked back at Amelia with raised eyebrows. Well, that was fast, he said, turning the screen toward her. It was a social media post, a 30-second clip of her performance. Already gaining traction. The caption read, Waitress at Bellini's reveals hidden talent after billionaire's dare. Watch till the end. Hidden genius or prodigy, you are mind blown. Amelia's stomach tightened. Great, she muttered. Now what? Now, Victor said, pocketing his phone. You have a choice. You can run from this or you can embrace it. But either way, after tonight, things will be different. As if to emphasize his point, her manager approached, phone in hand, looking slightly dazed. Chen, the restaurant owner, just called. He saw the video online. He wants to talk to you immediately about opportunities. Amelia almost laughed at the absurdity of it all. 4 years of struggling, scraping by, rebuilding her life piece by piece, and one impulsive decision had changed everything in an instant. Tell him I'll call tomorrow, she said, surprising herself with her composure. I think I'm done for tonight. Her manager nodded, clearly still processing the revelation about his formerly invisible staff member. May I offer you a ride home? Victor asked as the manager walked away. I suspect you could use some peace and quiet to process all this. Amelia considered declining. Accepting felt like another step down a path she wasn't sure she was ready to travel. But the thought of taking the late-night bus, possibly being recognized if that video continued to spread, was equally unappealing. Yes, she finally said. Thank you. As they prepared to leave, Amelia cast one last glance at the piano. For so long she had defined herself by what she had lost, her father, her homeland, her music. Tonight had shown her that perhaps not everything lost was gone forever. Victor followed her gaze. You know, he said quietly, talent like yours doesn't come along often. But what you do with it, that's entirely up to you. For the first time that evening, Amelia smiled without reservation. I'm beginning to believe that might actually be true. Sunlight streamed through the blinds of Amelia's small apartment, waking her from a restless sleep. For a moment she lay still, trying to convince herself that last night had been just another stress dream, the kind where she found herself on stage unprepared, her fingers frozen above piano keys. But the check on her nightstand told a different story. $10,000 signed by Victor Kaplan. Real, not a dream. She reached for her phone, wincing at the flood of notifications. Texts from coworkers, voicemails from numbers she didn't recognize, and social media exploding with that video. It had been viewed over 2 million times overnight. This is insane, she whispered, scrolling through comments from strangers around the world. Who is she? Chinese prodigy in hiding? That billionaire just changed her life. Can we talk about those hands, though? Amelia dropped the phone as if it had burned her. This was exactly what she had been avoiding for years. The spotlight, the scrutiny, the weight of others' expectations. She'd chosen anonymity for a reason. A text alert drew her attention back to the phone. It was from her graduate advisor. Amelia, I just saw the video. We need to talk. This changes everything. Before she could respond, her phone rang, the restaurant owner. With a deep breath, she answered, Hello? Amelia, thank goodness. I've been trying to reach you all morning. His voice bubbled with excitement, a stark contrast to his usual businesslike tone. The response has been incredible. The restaurant's phone is ringing off the hook. People want to know when you'll play again. I'm thinking we create a special event. Friday nights, maybe? Piano with Amelia. We'll charge a cover, of course, split the proceeds. Mr. Torres, Amelia interrupted firmly. I haven't agreed to anything yet. A pause. But surely you understand the opportunity here. For both of us. The familiar feeling of being used, of her talent being seen as a commodity, rather than an extension of herself, washed over Amelia. It was partly why she'd walked away years ago. I need some time, she said. I'll call you back. She hung up before he could protest, then turned off her phone entirely. The sudden silence in her apartment was a relief. She needed to think. Her gaze fell on the small keyboard tucked in the corner of her living room. A basic electric model, nothing like the grand pianos of her past. She had bought it during a moment of weakness 2 years ago but rarely touched it, afraid of awakening feelings she couldn't control. Now, drawn by an invisible thread, she moved toward it. Sitting on the edge of her couch, she powered on the keyboard and gently pressed a key. The sound was tinny, artificial, but it didn't matter. Something had changed last night. A door long closed had been cracked open. She began to play, hesitantly at first, then with growing confidence. Not Rachmaninoff this time, but Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, a piece her father had loved. The familiar notes filled her small apartment, transforming the space. Time slipped away as she played one piece, then another, her fingers remembering what her mind had tried to forget. When a knock at her door finally broke the spell, she realized with surprise that hours had passed. Standing, she stretched her stiff fingers and moved to the door, peering through the peephole. It was Victor Kaplan, looking unusually casual in jeans and a simple button-down shirt. Amelia hesitated before opening the door. How did you find my address? Victor had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. I may have convinced your manager it was an emergency. At her frown, he quickly added, which it sort of is. Have you seen what's happening online? I turned my phone off. She didn't invite him in, but she didn't close the door either. Smart move. Victor nodded approvingly. But eventually you'll have to deal with it. The video's gone viral. Music critics are speculating about your background. Someone dug up old competition footage from Beijing. Amelia felt her stomach drop. They found those? The internet never forgets, Victor said gently. Especially when it comes to prodigies who mysteriously disappear. Amelia sighed, finally stepping back to allow him entry. Her apartment was tiny and sparsely furnished, a stark contrast to the luxury Victor was accustomed to, but he didn't seem to notice. His attention immediately went to the keyboard. You've been playing, he observed. She didn't deny it. Just remembering. Victor nodded, understanding in his eyes. That's why I came. To see if you'd made any decisions about the gala next month. It's been less than 24 hours, Amelia pointed out. In the music world, particularly with viral sensations, that's practically an eternity. He smiled, but there was truth behind his words. Opportunities like this have short lifespans. Amelia crossed to her small kitchenette. Tea? She offered, needing something to do with her hands. Please. As she filled the kettle, she found herself studying Victor more closely. In the restaurant, he had seemed larger than life. Wealthy, powerful, untouchable. Here, in her modest apartment, he looked more human. There were faint shadows under his eyes, a slight crease between his brows. Why does this matter to you? She asked suddenly. You barely know me. Victor considered the question, taking a seat on her couch. Partly, it's selfish. Finding hidden talents is something of a hobby of mine. It's led to some of my most successful investments. He paused. But with you, it's different. How so? My mother was a pianist, he said, surprising her with the personal disclosure. Not world-class, but she loved it more than anything. She gave it up to support my father's career, to raise me. By the time I was successful enough to give her back that opportunity, her arthritis was too advanced. His expression softened with the memory. She never complained, but I saw the regret in her eyes whenever she heard beautiful piano music. Amelia set a mug of tea before him. I'm sorry. When I heard you play last night, Victor continued, I heard something I recognized, the sound of passion denied, finally breaking free. He met her gaze directly. I believe in second chances, Amelia. Not just for you, but for all the people your music could touch. His sincerity was unexpected, making it harder to maintain her protective walls. I'm not the same person I was, she said quietly. That girl who performed in Beijing, she was fearless, single-minded. Music was everything, and now? Amelia sat across from him, cradling her own mug. Now I understand that music isn't everything. It can be taken away. People can be taken away. She took a sip of tea. I'm not sure I want to put all of myself into something that uncertain again. Victor nodded slowly. That's fair. But consider this, maybe now you can approach music differently. Not as the all-consuming force it once was, but as a gift you choose to share, on your own terms. His words resonated more than Amelia wanted to admit. The restaurant owner called, she said, changing the subject slightly. He wants me to perform regularly, Victor scoffed. Of course he does. Your video just gave his establishment more publicity than his entire marketing budget for the year. He mentioned splitting the proceeds. Generous, Victor said dryly, but you're worth more than tips from dinner patrons, Amelia. She knew he was right, but the idea of stepping back into the professional music world terrified her. What if I'm not good enough anymore? What if last night was just a fluke, an emotional response to being challenged? There's only one way to find out, Victor replied. He gestured toward the window where a sleek black car waited at the curb. I have a proposition. Another one? Amelia raised an eyebrow. This one's better. He smiled. There's a Steinway & Sons showroom downtown. Private practice rooms, the finest pianos in the world. No audience, no pressure. Just you and the instrument getting reacquainted properly. The offer was tempting, painfully so. Her keyboard was adequate for basic practice, but a real piano. And if I hate it? She asked. If I decide this isn't what I want? Then I'll drive you home, you'll tear up my check, and I'll personally make sure that video gets buried so deep you can go back to your normal life. He held her gaze. But I don't think that's what you want. Not really. Amelia looked at her hands, server's hands that had somehow remembered how to create magic last night. The truth was, she'd felt more alive at that piano than she had in years. No strings attached? She asked. None, Victor promised. Just an opportunity. After a moment's hesitation, Amelia nodded. Let me change first. 20 minutes later, they pulled up outside an elegant building in the city's arts district. The Steinway showroom was officially closed for a private event, but the manager greeted Victor by name, ushering them inside with deferential smiles. The Hamburg Concert Grand is in the back room. As requested, Mr. Kaplan, the manager said. Complete privacy. Amelia followed Victor through the showroom past rows of gleaming pianos that made her heart beat faster. When they reached the private room, she stopped in the doorway, momentarily overwhelmed. The piano was magnificent, a 9-foot concert grand with a polished ebony finish that reflected the soft lighting. It was the kind of instrument she had once taken for granted and then lost access to completely. Take your time, Victor said, sensing her emotion. I'll be outside when you're ready. He closed the door behind him, leaving Amelia alone with the piano. Slowly, almost reverently, she approached it, running her fingers lightly over the lid before sitting on the bench. The keys felt perfect beneath her fingers, responsive, balanced, alive. She began with simple scales, reacquainting herself with the action of a professional instrument. Then, almost without conscious decision, she began to play. Chopin gave way to Liszt, to Beethoven, to Bach. Pieces she had performed hundreds of times, pieces she had thought forgotten. Her body remembered what her mind had tried to suppress, the joy of creation, the transcendent connection between musician and instrument. Tears streamed down her face as she played, but she barely noticed. For the first time in years, she felt whole again, as if a missing limb had been restored. Outside the door, Victor listened, a small smile playing on his lips. He didn't need to see her to know what was happening inside that room. The music told him everything. Amelia Chen was finding her way back to herself. And whether she played his gala or not, he knew she would never truly walk away from music again. Some talents were simply too integral to the soul to be denied forever. 6 months had passed since the night that changed everything. Amelia stood backstage at Carnegie Hall, breathing deeply as the murmur of the audience filtered through the heavy curtains. Her black concert dress, borrowed from a designer who had eagerly offered to dress the Waitress pianist for her debut, felt both foreign and familiar against her skin. 5 minutes. Ms. Chen, a stagehand whispered, clipboard in hand. Amelia nodded, flexing her fingers absently. Gone were the small calluses from carrying trays. Her hands were a musician's again, nails perfectly shaped, skin meticulously cared for. The past 6 months had been a blur of practice, coaching, interviews she'd reluctantly agreed to, and adjusting to a life she'd thought forever lost. Nervous, she turned to find Victor approaching, elegant in a tuxedo. Unlike the guests at his party half a year ago, he now felt like a friend, someone who had seen her at her most vulnerable and most powerful. Terrified, she admitted with a small smile. But in a good way, Victor nodded, understanding. Your father would be proud. Tears pricked at the corners of Amelia's eyes. I keep thinking about him today. He always believed I would play Carnegie Hall someday. And now you are. Victor hesitated, then handed her a small velvet box. A small token for good luck. Amelia opened it to find a delicate jade pin, a small piano exquisitely carved. Victor, it's beautiful, but it's not from me, he explained quickly. When your story went viral, someone from your father's music school in Beijing reached out. Apparently, he had commissioned this years ago, planning to give it to you after your first major international performance. After he got sick, young Victor shrugged. It's been sitting in a colleague's drawer all these years. Amelia's hands trembled as she lifted the pin. How did you find this? I have resources, Victor said simply, and I thought you should have it tonight. She clutched the jade piano tightly, feeling as if her father was somehow present. Thank you. A gentle chime sounded, 2-minute warning. I should go find my seat, Victor said. Front row as promised. Wait, Amelia caught his arm. I never properly thanked you. For that night, for the dare, for everything after. Victor shook his head. No thanks needed. Just play like you did in that practice room at Steinway. Like no one's watching, but everyone needs to hear it. As he left, Amelia carefully pinned the jade piano to the inside of her dress, close to her heart. Then she took another deep breath and moved toward the stage entrance. The last 6 months replayed in her mind like a montage. The day after her session at the Steinway showroom, she had called Victor and accepted his offer to play at the gala. That performance had led to interest from agents, record labels, and concert promoters, all captivated by both her playing and her story. The viral video had grown into a full-blown phenomenon. Waitress to Carnegie Hall was how the media framed it, though Amelia knew the journey was far more complex. She had given a few carefully selected interviews, declined reality TV offers, and focused on what mattered, rebuilding her relationship with music. She had also quit her restaurant job, though she still visited occasionally, leaving generous tips for her former co-workers. Mr. Torres had been disappointed but understood when she declined his offer to perform regularly. Instead, she had accepted Victor's help finding a proper practice space and a suitable piano. To her surprise, her graduate advisor had been supportive, helping her adjust her music theory studies to accommodate her renewed performance career. Theory and performance should inform each other, he had said. You're living what most of our students only study. The stagehand's voice broke through her memories. Ms. Chen, we're ready. Amelia nodded and stepped forward as the announcer's voice boomed through the hall. Ladies and gentlemen, making her Carnegie Hall debut, pianist Amelia Chen. The applause washed over her as she walked onto the stage. The lights were blinding, the hall enormous, but somehow she felt calm. She spotted Victor in the front row just as he'd promised. Beside him sat her graduate advisor and, surprisingly, her former restaurant manager, looking slightly uncomfortable but proud. Amelia bowed, then settled at the magnificent Steinway concert grand. This moment, the pause before playing, the breath before the plunge, had once been filled with anxiety. with her father's expectations, with the weight of her prodigy status. Now it felt different. She placed her hands on the keys, closed her eyes briefly, and began to play. She had chosen to open with Chopin's Ballad No. 1 in G minor, a piece that mirrored her own journey, beginning gently, building through complexity and struggle, ultimately arriving at a passionate conclusion. As she played, the technique drilled into her since childhood merged with something new, her own voice shaped by loss, struggle, and rediscovery. The audience disappeared. The hall disappeared. There was only the music flowing through her like a current, connecting the child she had been with the woman she had become. When the final notes faded, the silence was complete. Then, like a wave breaking, the applause began, tentative at first, then building to a thunderous standing ovation. Amelia rose, bowed, overwhelmed by the response. As the applause continued, her mind flashed back to that night at Bellini's. Victor's dare, Richard's smirk, her own moment of decision. How strange that a single moment of courage, of defiance, could alter the course of a life so completely. After 2 encores, Amelia finally left the stage, emotionally drained but exhilarated. Backstage was a flurry of activity. Flowers being delivered, music critics waiting for comments, her agent fielding calls already coming in with new offers. Breathtaking, her agent gushed. The Times critic was in tears. Literally in tears. Amelia smiled but felt disconnected from the business side of her success. Tonight hadn't been about critics or future contracts. It had been about honoring her past while embracing a new beginning. Eventually, she made her way to the small reception area where Victor waited, champagne in hand. To Carnegie Hall, he said, offering her a glass. 2 unexpected dares, she countered, clinking her glass against his. They sipped in comfortable silence, watching the crowd of well-wishers and music industry people from a slight distance. So, Victor said finally, was it worth it? Coming back to all this? Amelia considered the question seriously. Yes, she said after a moment, but not for the reasons I once thought. When I was younger, I played for recognition, for my father, for China. I was good, but I was never really playing for myself. And now? Now I play because I can't imagine not playing. She smiled, the truth of it settling in her chest like a warm glow. The music was always there, even when I tried to silence it. I just needed to find a new relationship with it. Victor nodded, understanding in his eyes. What's next? European tour? Recording contract? The offers will be pouring in after tonight. Actually, Amelia said, setting down her champagne, I have something else in mind first. She told him about her idea, a foundation to support talented young musicians facing financial hardships. Using her sudden platform not just for her own career, but to create opportunities for others who might otherwise be lost to circumstance. Like a dare, but with actual support behind it, she explained. Finding hidden talents is your hobby, right? Maybe we could make it something more. Victor's expression shifted from surprise to genuine interest. A partnership? If you're interested, Amelia said. Your business sense, my musical experience. We could do something meaningful. Before Victor could respond, Amelia's former restaurant manager approached, looking starstruck. That was incredible, he said. I had no idea. All those months serving drink? Amelia smiled warmly. Neither did I, in a way. Thank you for coming tonight. The kitchen staff pooled tips to buy my ticket, he admitted. They're all so proud. Bellini's is famous now because of you. After he moved on, Victor returned to their conversation. A foundation for hidden musical talents, he mused. It has potential. But don't you want to focus on your own career first? You've only just begun your comeback. Amelia touched the jade piano pin beneath her dress. I don't see why I can't do both. My father always said music isn't just about playing notes. It's about creating connection, about touching something universal. She gazed around the reception room, at the wealthy patrons in their finery, at the critics scribbling notes, at the young music students who had scraped together money for standing room tickets. 6 months ago, I was invisible to people like this, she said softly. Now they listen when I play, when I speak. I want to use that voice for something beyond myself. Victor studied her with new respect. You know, when I dared you to play that night, I thought I was offering you a chance to reclaim your past. But you're looking toward the future instead. The past is always with us, Amelia said, thinking of her father, of Beijing, of the years of struggle, but it doesn't have to define what comes next. Later that night, after the reception had ended and the concert hall stood empty, Amelia returned to the stage alone. The cleaning staff, recognizing her, smiled and continued their work discreetly in the background. She sat at the piano that had carried her music to a full Carnegie Hall, running her fingers lightly over the keys without pressing down. Tomorrow would bring new challenges in